This episode is sponsored by Hero Schedule. If your department needs better scheduling software that isn't outdated, clunky, and expensive, Hero Schedule is an easy switch. It's $4 per user per month, and they give you a free 30-day trial. Get started at heroschedule.com and click on Try Hero Schedule. It is every police leader's responsibility to not only continually develop their own skills and abilities, but to prepare the next generation of leaders. Retired Captain Bill Fraass helps you meet this task by providing a clear blueprint to follow in his book, Leadership in Law Enforcement. To learn more about his book and other consulting and training he provides, go to www.code33consulting.com. That's code33consulting.com. The views and opinions expressed by the host and guests of this show do not represent their employing agency, department, or organization. All information should be regarded as anecdotal, contextual, and educational, and should not be misinterpreted as legal or medical advice. Welcome to Blue Grit Radio, the podcast that explores making better cops for a better community. I'm your host, Eric Tung. I've been an active police officer since 2007. We will dive into the aspects of police culture, health and wellness, leadership, and mindset. You'll hear from experts not only from policing, but all industries as they relate to being our best with purpose, passion, and positivity. Join me as we share stories, lessons, and advice so we can all be better for ourselves, our teams, our families, and our communities. All right, welcome back, everybody. I have a returning guest. I believe this is the third time, right? Retired Captain Bill Fraass. Bill, thanks so much for joining us once more.
It is my pleasure, and yes, it is the third appearance, and one of my favorite shows to do, so thank you for having me on.
Well, that's legit. No, thank you for the props. So for listeners, if you don't have it handy, and don't enter this when you're driving, but easy to find later, 186 and 196. That's episode 186 and 196. So Retired Captain has joined us. We've talked about law enforcement leadership, his book that encapsulates so many of these concepts, but leadership in law enforcement, 10 key traits and what law enforcement agencies can do to develop these in future leaders. So we've talked about leadership in and out. We've talked about, unfortunately, the very prolifically bad examples in those episodes on a national level. And unfortunately, everyone listening doesn't need more examples of the negative. However, those were pretty deep dives. Like, it wasn't just like headline cursory, like you did a lot of research. So I appreciate you walking through all that with us. But today we're going to be talking about kind of a pivot, which is also, an intersection of leadership, because we want cops to be leaders in the community, but we're talking about education. And so I want people to hear that and think about training as well as education. And we're going to get to formal education, because these are very, very relevant topics. And like, how do you train? How do you teach cops to be effective and to be actual, like, legit cops and do the job and like make probation, like actually do the job on a baseline, but then also, be effective for the community, for public safety. And so that's kind of what we're talking about walking in. And Bill has provided a lot of these frameworks and thoughts as we were juggling some ideas far before some news updates and legislative updates. And so with that, Bill, can you please give us like a quick intro for those that haven't heard the prior episodes? Like, tell us a little bit about your career and why law enforcement leadership and the concept of how we need to train and educate cops is so significant to you.
Well, I spent a little bit over 27 years with the Sausalito Police Department out in California, where I rose from 19-year-old reserve officer to captain. My last active duty assignment was as acting chief of police before I suffered an injury that led to my retirement. And for me, leadership became important because I saw examples of good leadership, but I also saw examples of horrible leadership. Mm-hmm. And as I was going through my career trying to pick the best people to emulate and avoid the worst people, I was learning valuable lessons from both, but I was also looking for ways of further development. And in that part of further development, I saw that in police work and leadership, hand in hand with those two came education. And as I was going through, I entered law enforcement with just a little bit of junior college. And I utilized the incentives that was given to me through the department to enhance my education, where I received my associate's degree as a reserve, my bachelor's degree as a detective, and my master's degree as a sergeant. But as I was going through that, I was learning that education is a supplement. Formal education is one thing, but more
Mm-hmm.
importantly, we need an informal source of education. And for informal education encompasses so many things, from reading, from training, from discussing with friends, from watching podcasts, or just for time on the street and talking to people and getting older, or life experiences.
Mm-hmm.
And I found that many times the two were not discussed together. And in fact, they are together. And that is why it's so important, because now in California, as well as many other states, they're now talking about requiring certain levels of college education for law enforcement. Many people want, originally the thing was being pushed by many anti-police or police reformist groups, saying you needed a minimum of a bachelor's degree just to become a basic police officer. Now things have been dialed back a little bit, saying, hey, that's very unrealistic because of the staffing crises and the retention crises and the hiring crises everybody's facing. That will just
Mm-hmm.
limit our pool further and further. What now a lot of people are pushing is, once you get on the job and you get out of the academy, you now have a certain amount of time to receive a certain level of education. In the Assembly Bill 992 in California, which may be modeled in many different states that do not have education requirements already, basically says 36 months after receiving your basic certificate, which is what you get right out of the police
Yeah.
academy, you have to either obtain a bachelor's degree or an associate's degree or a police degree, which is being developed by the chancellor of the all community colleges, so they're developing that, or police certificate, which is it's still formal education, but in a lesser amount. I believe for the police degree, it's a 60 unit requirement, and for a certificate, it's approximately 24 unit certificate. But once again, that's heavily focused on formal education. And as we know, formal education isn't all true education. What we need in law enforcement is a culture of developing lifelong learners
Mm-hmm.
through all means of education.
Yeah, I love how you really painted the landscape there. There's a lot of the tangible things of like the environment we're actually in right now. And I like how you also kind of alluded to not discrediting formal education, but like looking at it as like a piece, like a almost like a spoke of a wheel. You talk about life experience, you talk about experience on the job, and just mentorship, just seeking learning outside of formal degree or formal credits through a university or an institution. And then it makes me think about just kind of like learning like school of hard knocks. Like we all know cops that are fantastic communicators, fantastic team members, even fantastic leaders and subject matter experts that do not have any formal education. And I mean, we can even talk about the military and so many tangible translatable skills from the military in all kind of almost countless types of roles that people have in various military experience and service.
Exactly. And a lot of times when we're talking about so heavily on the formal education side, we're discounting all those other valuable sources of education. Some of the best people I ever had work on my team, at the time they were on my patrol team or later on my investigative team, neither one had formal education to start with. They went back to school about doing it, but they had a boatload of informal education
Mm-hmm.
from the 6 years they did in the military, the 2 tours each of them did in Iraq, the time they were as police officers, the lives they were living, what they were learning on their own. And they were sucking information up. So we can't discount life experiences, because I could tell you that the life in the School of Hard Knocks will give you a doctorate degree in so many things that you will never learn in true formal education. Also, many people, as they're viewing the formal education, they're thinking that, well, if you get this, you're automatically going to be successful. And anybody who's ever been on the job and has had to hire people or then work with people can tell
Mm-hmm.
stories about people with formal education that couldn't truly make decisions. They were possibly good with the book work, but on the street, they didn't know what they were doing. They couldn't communicate with people.
Yeah.
They didn't have that true life experience. While you have other people come in on who may not have any other education, but they were in retail, they were in the military, they were construction, they were part of unions, and they are able to communicate with people, they are able to relate to people, they're able to talk about different topics. A degree is great. A degree helps you prepare for things, but it's in policing as well as the world right now is education. People believe education is trying to train people what to think. True education is training people how to think.
Mm-hmm.
Education is the acquisition of knowledge, beliefs, and skills. It's not a degree on the wall. So that's why we need to, as a culture for law enforcement, we want our officers getting better and getting better on their own, as well as, and part of that's the formal thing. I was very proud in my office. I had my degrees on my
Yeah,
walls.
you should
I
be.
worked hard for those,
Yeah.
but also my lifelong thirst for reading. You can see in my background numerous books from police, military, business leadership, as well as sports, as well as politics, critical thinking, thoughts. Some authors I don't agree with 100 at all, but I read their information because I wanted to get that information. But also, from now, we have podcasts where so much information is being put out, such as yours, and you're putting out so many relevant topics that need to be discussed. That for many years, education was looked down on in law enforcement. It was hey, you know what, you don't really need it, or it's not, if you don't, it's the training on the job that's what counts. Everything else doesn't count. Well, in
Mm-hmm.
some ways, everything else does count. So we have to broaden our mind, but we also have to focus on remembering training is a vital part of education, but training is a different thing. You train for a skill. You train for the known. You train for the what is going to happen. Education prepares you for the unknown. It gives you the broader perspective. And you need that to be successful in this job, because if you don't have a broader perspective, when somebody comes up to you, talking to you about matters that mean a great deal to them, conflict in the Middle East, back the relationship between Great England and Ireland back in the 70s and 80s, so many issues that impact what we deal with today. If we don't have a common knowledge about that, you're not going to be able to have true discussions with people in order to get to move. And also, cops that don't have that common sense or can't read a room, they could be in more danger. Just because you have that degree on the wall is not going to keep you safer. Just because you have a degree doesn't mean you're not going to have to use force. There's a lot of lies out there and misinterpretations about how having a degree will do everything. It's kind of like de-escalation.
Mm.
Oh, if you could de-escalate anything. Well, no, you can't. Education doesn't solve every problem, and you can't de-escalate every issue.
Yeah, yeah. I'm gonna put a pin in that real quick before we get into like interpreting the data or how people may be interpreting it at first glance. But there's a few things there, and one, the return to this like lifelong learner. And I feel more than ever, the older I get, like the more I need to learn. And I think that I get excited by being around people that come on the show, people that listen to the show. I mean, it's a very active thing. You don't just kind of listen to this passively. It's not really. It's meant to be entertaining in a way, but truly not just like let your eyes roll back and just kind of let yourself drool. No, like a lot of conversations that I have here, I personally get a little taxed because I'm trying to think in all these different ways of like how we can up level. And you brought up several things. One is looking outside of industry. Chief Booker Hodges mentioned that as well. He's out in Bloomington, and just recognizing that there's so much we can learn outside of the law enforcement industry and even outside of military, because that's a good default. There's a lot of carryover, but I like looking at just organizational leadership from the corporate settings. There's a lot that I'm not really sure how to adapt that concept or that idea that someone might share about in the boardroom or with their work group at a startup. But I'm like, there's a little bit of a thought that at least it like gets my creative juices going. Like, how would I adapt that with my sergeants? Maybe in the right context. So there's probably a lot of things where I can't really approach it that way, but it does have us thinking broadly so that we can get better. Because ultimately, this job, I feel, is so much about adapting. And you said that so well, which is education is about developing thinkers, not, essentially information recallers, right? And I'll quickly say that in my own experience, coming into law enforcement at 21 years old, I had a degree, it was a liberal arts degree, so I did learn to critically think and learn information and read and write and speak about it. I think all those things were very helpful for my career, but especially as I advanced in my career with more time. But it was really just almost an overemphasis of trying to recall information that had me hitting my biggest stumbling blocks in block one of FTO. I was in this science mode rather than recognizing the art of it, right? And so I think, like so many things, there's kind of the unwritten and there's the art and science, and where those things come together. And that's also what pops up in my mind as you continue to explain these concepts.
Exactly. I mean, knowing what information and then implying how you do things on the street are two different things. I remember there was one kid I grew up with that was a very nice kid, wanted to be a cop, wanted to be a police officer so bad, went to a college, got his degree in college, and then he actually ended up working at a jurisdiction next to me. He lasted about 4 days in FTO because he could not put handcuffs on somebody.
Hmm.
He couldn't go through that mental block of putting handcuffs and restraining somebody or taking away their freedom. Well, you looked at it, he had a bachelor's degree, I believe he even had a master's degree in criminal justice, and he couldn't do the job. Well, that's just, you know what? That does his education and his did not help him because you couldn't physically do the job. And that's what we have to realize is that doing the job is a skill. It's an art. It's all about communication. It's all about dealing with people. It's all about being problem solvers. And formal education should give individuals a broad spectrum of ideas, of concepts, of how to critical think. But you have to remember, even in the education world, a 4-year degree is considered a basic degree. It's just enough to get you into a door. And so this is the same thing in law enforcement. Our basic certificate is enough to get you into a door. But you take all those little skills and you apply them. And it's kind of like when we focus on a lot of leadership, and we were talking about you want to go outside of the industry and you pick different areas. I fully believe that. And often in police, we turn to military. But First Sergeant Matt Eversman, famous for the Black Hawk incident down in Somalia, as he stated once to me in the endorsement of my book, so often people look at the military as the be-all and end-all of leadership, and that's not true. Just no one is the be-all and end-all. You got to have a broad perspective. That's why your education is so important, and that's the self-informal education. Because as you're going through your college or anything like that, there are classes you have to take. There's a process you have to go through. Some of them, humanities. Some humanities classes may be wonderful. Most people sit in there and drool because that's nothing to do with their class. But there's so much you can learn from. But as you get out of that formal structure, you need to expand your thinking. And that's why the self-education, the lifelong learning, reading about things, reading about people. I always like to say there's so many books out there about the how-tos, the mechanical, the motorcycle repair and leadership, or guiding people through the acts of a dog, or stupid things like that. For me, for education, you have to learn from people. So that's why I say you have to read about historical stuff. You have to read people's biographies, autobiographies, all throughout the business world, the police world, military, politics, critical thinking. Malcolm Gladwell, I don't agree with everything he says on many things, but his concepts of outliners is a huge thing you need to know about, because it's like some people are just so skilled in one thing. So you have to know about critical thinking and how fast things could happen. It's authors like that you need to open your mind to, because they will introduce you to thoughts that will then be able to put you, when you're on the street, you're thinking on a broader perspective. You're talking to people. And as you become a leader, you're able to deal with people. You're able to communicate with people, but you're also looking at situations with a broader viewpoint, and then applying your self-education, your formal education, and your hard-earned experience on the streets to make things safer. And that's where I like to turn is people sometimes use maxims. Oh, if you have a 4-year degree, you're going to have less opportunities to use. They're not going to use force as much. Well, what are the circumstances are all these things happening? Are these people just talking so much and trying to de-escalate something? A person runs down the road and commits another crime? Or is the person trying to de-escalate things so much that they do not take the soft hand takedowns? They don't take the small uses of force that just make things happen.
Mm-hmm.
And they try to talk their way out of it to the point where you have to go and use a critical level of force. That's where it's like, what's going on? I mean, I've known people, one of the people I worked with in my career had a 4-year degree. He had worked in the business world. He came into the job later in life. That guy would thump people for no reason whatsoever and then try to talk his way out of it. He had the gift of gab,
Mm-hmm.
but he just would not, he couldn't understand what's going on. Then I had another person who had no formal education, who could handle incidents just like smooth, talk people down from a lot of things. But he had military experience. He had life experience. He was one of the most well-read people I have ever known in my life. I mean, people used to say that he had a big head, and we laughed about it because we said your brain is so big it made your head big. But he was somebody who could make things happen smoothly and softly. If necessary, he could turn it on. But got to get away from the grandiose thoughts of this will solve everything. And you have to start looking that if we want a bunch of robots, we could create you do this and you go through, you check the boxes and it doesn't mean anything. It's like developing a supervisor or developing a leader. If you're doing things just to check the boxes, you're not truly learning from that. You're not truly developing. And as you're trying to do self-education, you're trying to do self-improvement, you have to realize that it's not about just checking the box. It's about actually listening and learning and taking those opportunities to do so.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's worth mentioning, especially for the younger listeners. And I know that there are some people in their teens that are starting to listen to this, which is like really humbling that you're spending your time doing this. But it shows that you're so serious about this type of career. But there's a distinct difference between correlation and causation. And so when we talk about statistics, correlation basically like these things are happening along the same time. We do not have any proof of relation. Right, versus causation. So the causation that someone might assume is that, oh, use of force is lower with those that are college educated. So because of that, your education makes you less prone towards violence. However, it's almost like saying, hey, like there's more. What's the? Oh yeah, a common kind of illustration of this is people eat more ice cream in the summer and they also get more sunburns, right? So the ice cream is creating sunburns, which is not the case. And we know that. But what I want to get to is that when I think about statistics, and I understand data is important and it drives a lot of decisions to make them objective and not subjective. However, I can even think about my experience and knowledge in the types of agencies that have historically required a degree or a bachelor's, like which is way less common than requiring an AA or some credits, is that to actually have that be effective and still staff your people, it's generally, in my experience, and let me know in California, but in Washington anyway, it was historically more affluent areas that paid better, right? So affluent areas, the populace is much more educated. It's really expensive to live there, that kind of thing. The crime is lower there. I mean, that's just sociology. So if you have an area that's really affluent and has lower crime, then maybe a correlation, causation, whatever, is going to be there's fewer arrests with force. There's fewer people resisting those violent crimes because you don't have those violent crimes. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, I agree. When you start looking at it, is when you're requiring officers to have certain higher levels of education to get into the door, that means you're able to be more. You don't have a retention issue. You don't have a turnover. You don't have as much of a turnover, and you're offering more incentives. Usually, those are more, like you said, more affluent. It's not the, you know what, we are Los Angeles and we are supposed to be 11,000 and we're actually probably closer to 7,000 right now.
Yeah.
We need to get
Mm-hmm.
good people in the door.
Mm-hmm.
And you're going, I'm turning away people because they don't have these degrees. And the way the system is, they're looking at AB right now is a 992 regarding getting those degrees. I don't mind it as being part of the overall training program of a new officer. Yes, let's get him some formal education, but let's make sure the department's sending him true police training. Let's make sure we're teaching them for some informal training. What I'm looking and making sure is we don't set some grandiose belief, and then we start setting the bars too high, because if we were to do that, some of the greatest law enforcement leaders there have been in the last 100 years would never have been able to get in the door.
Hmm.
Bill Bratton would have never been able to become a police officer. John Timoney would have never been able to become a police officer. Could you imagine law enforcement without those two? They got their degrees later in career because they can encompass the goals of lifelong learner. And even then, they stated to me when I was doing my book, lifelong learning, avid reader, learning from situations. That's what we need. I mean, if we cycle ourselves, and then you look at it and you can start looking at those departments that only hire college grads. Well, yes, they're more affluent. So it's going to be more white collar. There are going to be more situations where they are not going to fight the cops. There's not going to be, let's say, gang issues. There's not going to be drive-by shootings. There's not going to be people trying to fight the officers, as if you go into different areas where you actually have lower socioeconomics or you have a historic crime problem where people are more combative. They have a bias towards the police. They're willing to take the police on. They do not care. They don't respect the uniform. They don't respect government. So do you think they're going to respect? So there's going to be more hands-on. And that's not, people are always go, well, that's just inner cities. Well, no, that's dealing with sovereign citizens. That's dealing with people from anywhere from the hood to the Ozarks. So that's the word you have to look at, is that it's the areas that you're policing that are going to generate that. And I always, when people put up statistics, I always like to remind them, like Mark Twain said, there's lies, there's damn lies, and then there's statistics.
I love that.
I can make anything look good on paper. Give me a couple numbers here and there, and I can show that cops that are left-handed, that go to school on Wednesdays and who have daughters named Chrissy, are more prone or less prone to use force than this person. I mean, you can spin numbers any way you want.
Let's get that hiring bonus ready for left-handers like myself. Yeah, for sure. And I don't mean to interrupt, but I mean, it just goes to, there's so many knee jerks and so many things, and I don't mean to discredit the general population that hears something like, oh, good idea. Yeah, I know a lot of people that went to college and like, yeah, it was a very like, it's a learning environment, and like what more knowledge the better, right? And it's an honest, maybe genuine response. However, like, what problem are we trying to solve? And that's what I think we need to zoom out a lot of times when we're having these conversations about change in policy, culture, legislation, leadership. But like, what is it we're actually trying to solve? And it sounds like we're trying to solve for what we perceive as violence, bias, these types of things. So where does education come in? Like, we're not saying cops are uneducated. We're saying the critics are saying that cops are violent, biased, like lean, like they're impatient, right? So why don't we zoom out and talk about how do we assess, select, and train for patience, empathy, communication skills? Because we can hear those things and recognize that does not. I don't even think it correlates with formal education. And another thing is just like, when you have these broad strokes, like formal education, okay, like what if you got a AA, a BA, a master's in engineering, like mechanical engineering? Is that pertinent to any of the things we're talking about? Like a cultural competency, like empathy, communication skills. Like, no, it's not. Like political structures, no, it's not. It's like, it's a hard science. It's over here in the land that I don't understand super well. But again, like, what are we trying to fix? What are we trying to solve for?
And that's exactly right here. We're trying to create a solution for something that's not truly a problem. But what's happening is you have people that are misinterpreting information to create what they are considering a problem. They always throw out, to become a police officer, you only need 600 hours of training. Hairdressers get more training. Car mechanics get more training. That's a misinterpretation of the facts. And also, people just don't realize what police training is all about and police education is all about. They don't realize the basic police academy is anywhere from 14 to 22 weeks long. Then you go into a field training program that could be anywhere from 12 weeks to 6 months long. Then you go into a probationary period that is usually anywhere from 18 to 24 months long. So it's no longer that basic 600 hours. Now you're adding on months and years you're on to your training program. And then It's an ongoing training program officers go through. So people that are demanding education beforehand because we have a lack of training, they don't understand the concepts of this is what a basic academy is, this is what a field training program is, and this is what a probationary period is. So that's where we have, as a profession, we have to speak out more and explain. It's not just 600 hours. It is this. It is a 600 hour to 800 hour police academy. It's a 14 weeks, 6-month long program, field training program, and an 18 months to a 2-year long probationary period. All that time, the officers in constant training. Then they get a training program later. What law enforcement has to do is now we have to build upon that and say, not only do we have all this, but we're developing a culture of lifelong learner, where we're encouraging officers who have not gone to school to go back to school. We're encouraging officers to read and watch podcasts and read professional periodicals on a whole host of different topics and scopes. We're encouraging officers to go beyond just what they find flashy and sexy and go in depth onto some of the social issues let's deal with. Let's encourage discussions. Let's encourage not only do we want you to read, but let's talk about it. Let's do a book club. Let's make sure we sit around the table and you know what, you can't make it to a college class, totally understandable, but there's online learning resources such as Curiosity U and Masterclass that exposes people to so many different things and different philosophies and things that are outside of the norms of law enforcement, but you can incorporate little bits and pieces. I mean, I'm just finished listening to a masterclass about gardening. And it's like, well, you know what? I play in the garden, but little things that you then equate, like make sure when you putting a plant in the ground is like a brand new officer. You can't start plucking on it right away and expect it to be healthy and expect it to be successful. You have to make sure that you build it up. You have to make sure it's properly fed, just taken care of, and then you could start taking things away from it. But also you look at it and the prospects of just listen to these people, because one day you're going to walk into a room and it's going to be a domestic violence victim who's completely crying, and you're trying to find some kind of nexus to make a personal connection, to be able to talk to the person. And you're going to walk in and go, oh, there's a lot of plants in this room. I don't really know much, but I did actually spend those 2 hours listening to that class once and go, I see you have a bunch of junipers in there, or you have a bunch of these potted plants and they look very well taken care of. You must be watering them every other day. Or I could tell that you got a very good green thumb. What tips do you use? That opens a door to start building a communication and levels of people. The more information you have, the better you're able to communicate. And you don't have to be an expert in everything. It's kind of like being a sergeant or a lieutenant or a captain or commander. You don't have to be an expert in everything. You have to have a little bit of knowledge on everything so you can lead people. Same thing about true education. Can't be an expert in everything, but just have enough information so that you could be conversationally fluent on a whole different topics. As you make your way up the ranks, degrees open doors that make things, they allow you to promote to different positions. Or in many ways, those degrees will help you be accepted by the community more as, hey, you know what, this person's a true trained professional. But while those are great for that, we have to realize that's just a building block. Our degrees are just the starting of the building block. So you can say, yes, you know what, I do have a degree, but I've been trained in all these different topics. I do this on my own. The degree is just part of it. That doesn't make me truly successful. It's this entire program that is. And we have to sell that as a lifelong learner. Because too many cops, as soon as they're off probation, they just kind of want to shut off the education mindset. I don't want to think about this anymore. I just want to do the job. I want to run and gun. I want to hit doors for SWAT. I want to do narcs. I want to my days off are just with my family. Totally understandable. But you have to make sure that you constantly learning and constantly growing, because if you're that person who shuts their mind off to training, you're going to be that person who doesn't progress in their career and that becomes the old stagnant naysayer on everything. So
Hmm.
if the more you learn, the more you develop yourself, the more you train, the more educated you get through the formal, informal sources, the better you're going to be in your career in a whole host, from career promotions to dealing with calls on the street, to dealing with politicians, to dealing with the grandma who's walking across the street who wants to talk about how she lost her brother in World War II. And if you don't have a common knowledge to go, oh, what theater was he in? Oh, let me talk a little bit about this. And also, we have to realize people with education, straight off the bat, they might have that formal degree, but they're only learning that degree. And if you talk to many recent college graduates and you make comments like, hey, can you tell me about some of these historical figures? And I'm not talking about obscure historical figures, but big names in the last 20 years. General David Petraeus. Could we talk about uh, Kissinger? And they'll look at you and go, who? It's like, well, what was your college education about? Oh, I went there and I took a couple of basic classes and I went to the dorm room and drank all night. Look, that's not what college is for. College was created to develop the leaders and to develop the thinkers. It wasn't developed to get people jobs.
Yeah, you said so much, and I'm going to rewind back to where you started on that last piece, which was gardening. And I love that you went there because I was going to take it there if you didn't. But the allegory to leadership and development and mentoring, right? And I've heard that before. Kind of like, you know, weed, seed, water, feed. I think there's actually a Police One article or kind of like analysis of a kind of recruit, development program and like their trainees, like how did they build them up? Because yeah, you can't. I mean, I'm not look at my lawn. I'm not a lawn guy, but there's a lot of lawn guys and gals out there that know like there's a process to like the steps you do it in, or you're going to kill off all your seedlings, right? You're going to trample that, or you're going to put chemicals on it, and then it's going to be like just a pile of mud, which is not the goal, right? And so, but they also take it to, hey, like this is building bridges and rapport. I remember when I was doing the college painting franchise, like pretty quickly, one of my managers, like kind of coaches, was like, "Hey, like, do you like sports?" And I'm like, "Nope." He's like, "Well, start like being aware of what's going on because almost everyone watches some type of sport, and it's an easy conversation piece, right?" I've since have loved learning about sports psychology on one end, and then leadership, as you point out. Like, let's learn from coaches because the stakes are high, the pressure is on, everyone's watching, right? These are critical moments, but there's so much you can take away from that. One example is and I'm not gonna butcher it or like or misremember who this is, but uh, a prolific NBA coach that decided to bench some of his star players in playoffs because he was worried about their longevity and injury going into playoffs. Right, like they were winning the game. He's like, okay, sub him out. But this was a time where that was less common, and the fans were pissed. The management was pissed. He got fines, but he took them all the way, and they won the championship. Right, so he knew the site, and so it's like mission driven and standing up for what's right, which is winning the mission and also the people, right? And I think most strong leaders will recognize both importance, right? So he's taking care of the players. He's like, hey, I'm the guy. Buck stops here. I'll take the flack. So many people can recognize the carryover there. And also, I love how you talk about historical figures. I'm nerding out a lot on philosophy, and so when you have like, we talk about stoicism in police work. I'm certainly not the first, and I won't be the last, but when you learn about some of these ancient Stoics, like Greek and Roman philosophers and statesmen, like no leadership problem is new. No people problem is new. It can get really complicated with emotions, but you can learn about some of their writings and some of their concepts that were valid for thousands of years. And to ignore all that you could learn from someone else is like ignoring someone's life's work. Like that was their life's work, pondering, not being distracted with cell phones and all that. And we can get a quick quote and then it like sets us right for the day, or just has us take a pause and figure out like, hey, we don't need to figure this out right now. We can marinate on it. And one thing I want to send out to people at any stage of the game, and I have to remind myself of this, is in policing, although like the stakes are high and it's life and death sometimes, most of the time when we make mistakes, it is not those moments, right? It is not timely. You can phone a friend. You should phone a friend. You should phone a sarge. As you talking about like training and all that, like there are so many times when a very new officer is by themselves or with a very new officer as a partner, and they gotta phone a friend. They gotta call that FTO that's going to be on, or maybe phone a prosecutor, phone the sergeant. Like you don't have to decide these things right now. Like, should I get a warrant or not? If you're asking, probably all those types of things. But that's not those critical seconds where you have like a half second to decide.
Exactly. We have to realize education is all your experiences, all your what you've dealt with, what you've learned, what you've been trained on, what classes you might have gone, who you have talking to. And I remember a great quote was Douglas MacArthur, five-star general of the armies, World War II, World War One, World War II in Korea, got fired in Korea for disobeying the president, but very prolific leader, very highly decorated. And he had a huge library. A lot of the books were coming from his father, who had been a general himself. And somebody goes, General, why do you have so many books? Why do you have so much, all these things? Do you read them? He goes, yes, I do. And he goes, why? Because no person could experience everything. But
Mm-hmm.
because I have studied the past and I have studied others, when I encounter similar situations, I have a guideline for what I can do and what can be done. And that's another thing we need to focus on in law enforcement. Like you said, no leadership is not dramatically different. People have been having the same issues, personnel issues, leadership issues, problem issues since the beginning of time, be it cops or be it regular folks. And if we go back and we study our history, we will find out that many solutions are there. We may need to adjust them a little bit or adapt them a little bit, but the basics are there. We just need to know about it. So it's not your first time as a lieutenant or officer, sergeant, lieutenant, captain, even chief, that, oh, here's a decision. What do I do? Oh, I'm the first time ever. Nobody else has ever made this decision. Yeah, daily they get made. But let's figure out how we can do it and how we go about doing it. And that's where education comes in. That's where life learned education comes in. That's where developing yourself, not just you got your education, formal education, which exposes you to some different individuals, that exposes you to different cultures, different thought processes, but it only gives you the basic education. It's up to you to make sure that you get more wide read, wide listened to, explore your knowledge base more. I mean, I never got excited about one college class I took and went, oh my God, I can't wait to do this. But I get excited when I listen to a good master class, when I open up a book, when I have a great discussion like with you. That's what encourages me. That's what makes me want to learn and what get better and just think more. When I go for my rehab walks every single morning, instead of listening to Bon Jovi or Waylon Jennings or any of that, I'm listening to a book on an audio book, to a master class, to a Curiosity U, to a podcast, because I'm taking that opportunity not only to physically make myself better, but to make sure that I'm building up. Even though I'm retired now, I'm an old guy, and I'm not a street cop anymore, I still want to learn. I still want to be the best I can be. So I'm using that as self-development time. And we need to encourage that, the self-development, the informal education. That's the leadership we as a profession have to be throwing back at individuals when they say, oh no, you have to have this. Or when you're having people from the outside trying to dictate mandates on us. We have to show that we have a holistic approach to education in law enforcement. And that's when it's up for our leaders. It's for the on-duty folks still, the active duty folks still, as well as the old dogs to come out there and say, hold on for a second, let's talk about this. Because I could tell you to people to this day, some of the most highly intelligent, most well-read, most well-spoken people I ever dealt with were police officers. And many of them didn't have formal education. They had some college education or even no education, but they were students of people. They were students of humanity. They were lifelong learners, and they could discuss anything from ongoing political issues in Two Buck Chuck to sports, to historical aspects, to philosophy. And it was working with those people that got me interested in becoming a lifelong learner.
Yeah, I love that. And it is one of the things that when people reach out, people that are testing or they're getting interested and they ask, like, what else can they be doing? They usually have, they have their resume and they have some things they're working on. But I almost broadly suggest, like, hey, look at like these different walks of health, right? Like mental, physical, social, emotional. financial, like relational, family. And if you can identify one thing to work on in all these respects, then you're going to be a better candidate and a better human. And with mental, it's like it's learning exactly what we're talking about, right? Physical, you got to be working on something. You got to be making your body a little bit better every day. It doesn't have to be a lot every day, but just better than we used to be. Because it's also what I would suggest all people work on, right? If there's anything that someone kind of wishes they could do, it's not too late. Like, if I hope everyone recognizes that if you wanted to know Spanish, if you're like, man, it'd be great to know Spanish for my job and just for travel and interests, like whatever, 15 minutes a day, if you do that for a few years, I guarantee you're going to be pretty legit at Spanish if you focus, right? If you want to learn about physiology and you want to develop, like, hey, like I'd like to be like a resource at work. I like working out, but I don't know that much. If you just learn like 15-30 minutes a couple times a day, or sorry, a couple times a week, along with what you're training, along with trying out different methodologies, listen to podcasts, like you will be a health resource, probably better educated than many of your big box gym trainers. Like that's a fact. Like I learned all that because I nerded out on it and it helped me learn for the job and all these things. So if there's ever anything, just recognize the gradual thing. It can seem really daunting to become a subject matter expert, but all experts become that through little tiny doses. Bill, this has been such a fantastic conversation. As I said before recording, I was like, we could go on hours talking about the intersection of education, training, performance, and leadership. And you certainly helped us understand why this is foundational to true leadership as well. But please, for the listeners, can you tell us, in closing, what's on your mind and where people can find you, your website, and your book?
Well, I'm always active on LinkedIn, so you could go there, see me. I try to post a couple times a week, thought-provoking things to get us talking. Also, you could go to my website, www.code33consulting.com, and www.code33consulting.com/order book to find out, to get my book, or Amazon, or to see the services we offer, the training services, the consulting services we offer. I like to remind people all the time that it is up to us to keep on developing ourselves. It's not the police department's duty. It's their responsibility, but it's not always their driving force. They'll give you the basics. It's up to you to get better and better. But I want to see that happening not only as you as a professional, but as you as a person. Continue to develop in learning, seeking out new challenges, gathering more information, taking on new challenges. Because in the long run, that's going to make you a better person. That's going to make you a better cop. And we have to have these big discussions. We have to be looking at this topic because other people are. And if we don't define this narrative, other people will define it for us. And they will define it wrong, like they have with everything they've ever done. So go out there, enhance your educational experiences, take some college courses, watch some things online, read some books. Go out and have those deep discussions with your friends over numerous different topics. But make yourself a little better every day. And when people come up and say cops aren't educated, fight back to that statement, stand up to that statement and state, yes, we all could always get better, but this is what we're doing. We are developing lifelong learners, and that encompasses formal and informal. Because I'll tell you this right now, informal education will have more of an impact and have a lasting strength in your personality and your persona than any formal education ever will be. So go out there and learn and better yourself.
So well said. Thank you so much, Bill. And for LinkedIn, I believe it's William Fraass, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. And that's Fraass. And last note, stop saying I'm just a dumb cop. I know a lot of my buddies say that, either on the street or in the office because it's, it's sarcastic, whatever. But there's a piece of that we're sometimes I hear a lot of people saying it because they are not as formally educated. But no, you are some of the most dynamic problem solvers, communicators, and effective humans that we certainly know. So thanks again so much, Bill.
You're welcome, and thank you for having me again.
Thank you for tuning into another episode of Blue Grit Radio. As always, support this community by subscribing, giving us a 5-star review, and following, liking, and sharing posts on Blue Grit Wellness on Instagram. You can reach me there or email me at bluegritwellness@gmail.com. Be well and stay gritty.